Hello and welcome to the Women's Network. I'm Elke and I'm your host. Today we will have a wonderful show for you. It will be very informative and very, very interesting. So please stay tuned. As I said earlier, this is the Women's Network. We discuss women's issues, women in general, and all my guests are women. And so it is today. About a few years ago, we women have made great strides in many directions in life, and to the point that about 1992, during our election year, we actually called it the Year of the Woman. However, I feel we are really in the decade of the women, and we are going stronger than ever before, meaning we are out there, we are very visible, we are in a lot of professions we've never been before, we are in government. Like I said, we are just about everywhere and anywhere, and it's no stopping ahead. But when I look around at the world situation, are we really strong in each and every area? Are there areas in the world like the Middle East or Africa or India, where the women have as many rights as we have here, right here in the Western world? Well, that is a subject for today. Let's explore some of these areas. And today, let's explore the Middle East, more or less the Arab women. And I have invited a wonderful, wonderful guest who will tell us more about the Arab women and how far they have come and how much further there is to go, and whether there is any place to go. Maybe it's tradition, but we will have her tell us. So let me welcome my guest for today, Ms. Fadwa El-Guindi. Hi, Fadwa. So
Hello.
nice to have you here.
It's my
I was
real
looking
pleasure.
forward to it.
Real pleasure to be here.
You are from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you lead in with a little bit of your background so we know who you are, and since you can talk about the two different areas so well.
Well, I'm Egyptian born. I was raised and got my education in Egypt and came to the United States actually many years ago, about 30 years ago, to get my PhD in anthropology, and then stayed here when I started having jobs of teaching. And so when I left Egypt, actually, I didn't leave to emigrate, to leave the country per se. I just came to finish my higher education in anthropology, and the situation was that I decided to stay here.
Well, I'm glad you did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have you on the show. We'll talk about the Arab women. Let's get an area, like, let's talk about geography. Which area will we talk about?
Well, when we say Arab, we are really talking about the 22 Arabic-speaking countries, about 400 million population. And it is part of the larger Middle East, but the Arabs share a history, share a tradition, and they, like for instance, Egypt is an Arab country, Jordan is an Arab country, Morocco is an Arab country, Iraq is an Arab country.
Because when most people think about Arab countries, we go into like Saudi Arabia and
Saudi Arabia as well is an Arab
Iran.
country. It's one of the Arab countries.
Now, when you say 22 countries, that's almost, I mean, I can't even
That's
visualize 22 countries. But I know there are a lot of smaller areas, and they all be counted. Okay.
No, when you look at the whole region, it's quite a large region
Quite
full of resources.
400 million, did you say?
But it's about 400 million now.
My God,
Yes,
that's a lot of women.
That's
there.
a lot of, well, half of them are women
Half
at
of, like,
least.
yeah, right, exactly. So we do
Yes.
have a subject here.
Yes.
So, well, let's go to the subject, the Arab women. Who are they? And there seems to be like a mystery around them. We have Arab men, they are out there, they are the business people, they are visual, they are on the streets, they're in the offices. Where do the women come in?
They're also there, but you know, one thing we should really try to do is demystify that. It's
Right.
so easy to begin to look at someone else from another culture as the other, the exotic. And they're real people with their lives, with children. They go to work, they bake bread, they cook rice, they have problems, they have fights. And I think it's very important to humanize them and not see them as an exotic, something to be painted and talked about and so on. The Arab area is a very lively area with a long history, of course.
Yeah.
And the Arab women are, you know, heirs to a very rich heritage.
Yeah.
And part of this heritage is the strength of women, which in earlier traditions like the Assyrian tradition, the Sumerian tradition, the Egyptian tradition, these are imageries of women who were the first poets in human history ever, you know, published, goddesses, queens and monarchs like Hatshepsut in Egypt. So they have a long, they are rooted with a long tradition of strength of women. Then you look at the present culture, like you raised at the beginning of your show, you raised the question of, do they have their rights like we do here? And I am, you know, I'm an American now, and was part of the feminist movement as it started in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And you'll find that there are rights that American women have, they had to fight for.
Right.
And they answer problems and issues that are relevant to American women. And you go to the Arab world and you find that they have other advantages and they have different problems. And any struggles that they have there will have to deal with the issues that they have there.
Right.
So for example, the Arab women, because of the kind of strength that they have, this strength comes, as I said, in part from their roots, but also in part from their families. The families are very central and continue to be very important in Arab society.
Right.
And the women are very important in the family. And the women have autonomous roles in the family. They are seen as independent. They are they inherit in their own names. They keep their maiden names without feminist movement.
I see.
Like even Mrs. Sadat, you mentioned Mrs.
Right.
Sadat privately before the show. I assure you her passport would be her father's name, not her husband's name. This is only the popular
Right.
public name for her, Mrs. Sadat. So Arab women are born keeping their names just like their brothers.
Right.
And that is very important because if you recall in the feminist movement here, we had to struggle
That's right.
to keep our names because names have something to do with credit, with identity,
That's
and
right.
so on and so forth. So these are some of the strengths that are there. What are the disadvantages or the weaknesses? Well, you find that in a way, the strength of the family, which is very good for the society, keeps crime down, keeps tradition strong, keeps the women protected and supported. It also controls the men and women because the family is more important than an individual.
Exactly. That's
And
right.
so the family tries to control its women and its men so that they would stay within the traditions of the family. Now this is where the problems come in. Supposing a father decides that his daughter is not going to get an education, she's finished because he has this kind of control over his
Oh,
daughter.
Okay. Yeah.
On the other hand,
Right.
the system itself, the Ministry of Education, will be trying to pull the daughter out and get her to
Give her-
participate.
right.
This is almost the opposite of the American situation.
Right.
The American situation is the opportunity is here.
Right.
And nobody's going to stop the American woman from going out and going to school, at least, you know, in the
Right.
past several decades. On the other hand, she needed an inner strength to allow her to do it. And when she went out to work, she found herself making coffee for her boss. She found herself telling herself, oh, I'm sugar and spice and everything nice. She found that she cannot be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, contrary to like the Arab situation where they do become doctors, lawyers, and engineers very easily if they pass the hurdle of the family.
Of the father. Right.
But here, they did have the opportunity, but the inner strength was lacking,
not there.
and it needed a feminist movement to get them out of that inner weakness. To consciousness raising. Remember those days when
Right,
consciousness
exactly.
raising groups getting together and
Right.
women networking and all that. So it's not like it's really great here and it's really very bad there. No, there are different problems. Problems exist. There are good sides here. The opportunity is wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Now, are the
in-
opportunities there? Let's say the family will open up and the children are ready to go out to the universities or for education. Are the opportunities there? Has the government provided?
yes, in fact, most of the support comes from the state. In the cases of the advanced countries, like for example, Egypt has a long history of women participating in public. And when they participate in public, they participate competitively with men. They don't choose soft roles. They go out there fighting for leadership roles. In fact, I found something very interesting about Arab women is when they have the opportunity, you find that they don't necessarily go to home economics and so on. They move to medicine, they move to engineering. So once the big obstacle is out of their way, nothing really stops them. Like in a place like Egypt and Iraq and Tunisia.
Yeah.
Uh,
Farwa, you brought us a clip.
Yeah.
And I saw a little bit of it, but I would like for you to lead us into the clip and sort of give the audience a little bit of an idea as to what we will be seeing, and then later on we can talk about it a little bit.
Okay, yeah, this was really a wonderful experiment we've done in the Arab community here in Los Angeles, where we decided to do a performance of traditional women's poetry coming from Bedouin women, where the poetry was collected by an anthropologist, a woman in fact, from the border of Libya and Egypt. But it's a traditional Bedouin group, and they collected poetry and stories. So we decided to perform them on stage, and all the artists on stage are Arab Americans from Los Angeles.
Oh, nice.
And it was absolutely a wonderful performance, and we'll see part of it and
Okay.
talk about its importance. Yeah.
Okay, well, we are ready, so I'm looking forward to it.
Sleeps where you are.
Fatwa, that was so interesting. Now, did you say earlier this was a dance of a wedding or a passion dance or?
It's a segment of a story being told among the Bedouins where this young woman that we've seen dancing was secretly meeting her lover in a tent nearby, and she was rejecting the pressure to marry her cousin.
Which was arranged by the family.
Well, which was, there was pressure on
Yeah.
her to marry him for traditional reasons. But she was in fact meeting her boyfriend, her lover, secretly in a tent. And that imagery that we've seen is a celebration of their love, actually.
Is that actually possible for a woman to have a lover on the side, or to have a lover while she is married maybe or whatever? I mean, is a woman that free? This is just it. I mean, are we at that point?
Well, it's not a matter of it's free. No, there are traditions and there are pressures for strict adherence to fidelity and
Right.
staying within the family and so on. But situations like this where young people are in love, happen all the time.
Sure.
It just depends on how the culture will deal with it. In a case like this, the outlet comes through their stories and through their poetry. So you find their stories telling about situations like this, in fact, and they tell it and they are happy to say it and they say it publicly. Stories about a woman who's in love with a man and she did not want to marry her cousin and so on. And then through the poetry, you find the women sitting together talking about their passions and their protests and what they like or don't like about marriage or what they don't like about their husbands and so on. But publicly, when you look at the culture, you'll see that it's very serious, stoic, reserved, and you say, hey, these people don't laugh, they don't know love, they do. But their passion comes out through different means, in a way intended so that the fabric of society doesn't fall apart and disintegrate.
Right. Now, can this particular play, let's say, if it were shown over in one of the Arab countries, would that stir up a controversy? Is it sort of like a Western showing of Arab?
Well, I think it would be
Wish-
nice to have them look at it because this is based on authentic material coming from the Bedouins, so it may shock them to know how strong and liberated their own traditional women
That's right.
are.
That's what I'm saying.
In
yeah.
fact, here, the Arab American men here, when they saw it, some of them reacted with resistance, and they
Really?
were challenging that this is not possible, that women would be so strong. And we kept telling them that this is authentic material collected by an anthropologist from the Bedouin women. And they said this is not possible. In other words, they have a fantasy. They want to indulge in the controls that society gives them.
Yeah.
And they don't want to let go their claim over the
Right.
women. And when they see it acted on publicly on stage, it violates,
Against
you know, the
exactly.
secrecy, the privacy of doing it. And it was very controversial in the Arab American community. Many articles in Arabic came out in the Arab American papers challenging this production.
Very interesting. And a little note on the side, which you mentioned earlier, this whole production was put together by women,
Women produced,
Which is-
directed, co-directed, and scripted by women.
which
Yes.
is Arabic American
Arab
women in this
American
case,
women, all of
which
them.
is really nice.
Oh, yes.
So progress. But let me go back into the marriage system. Like, do we still have like polygamy, and in nowadays age, can we still have it, deal with it, and how do the women deal with it?
Polygamy, which is having several wives
Right.
simultaneously, does exist. It's statistically very low.
I mean, that used to be a traditional idea.
Actually, it never was. This is the myth about it. It never was a traditional idea. And it's always blamed on Islam also, and maybe that's a chance to like clarify what is it. Polygamy existed in many societies in Africa and other parts of the world for, you know, for economic purposes and social purposes. When Islam came into Saudi Arabia, they felt that it should be limited to a particular number of wives, but that it should be only in exceptional situations. But of course, men abused
Right.
that premise, and some men were marrying wives for pleasure. This is not the way Islam intended it to be, and statistically it's very small.
Well, Barbara, you have one more clip, and I'd like for us to see that, and then we'll come right back.
Absolutely.
You want to lead us into like 10 seconds worth of?
Well, the next clip shows the women telling their stories, the two women telling their stories, the story of the young woman being pressured to marry her cousin, the story of the older woman being threatened to be divorced by her husband, who very strongly says, I'm staying in the house anyway to protect my children, and that she doesn't really care about marriage anyway. She's very liberated.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see it. I'm waiting.
My youngest daughter was nursing in my arms. left me. I was sick and tired. The man came up to me one afternoon as I sat by the oven. He said, "You're divorced." I said, "Thank you, that's just fine by me." He said, "You can go home to your relatives now." I answered, "And leave my daughters to be servants to the other women? No, I'll stay here with my children."
This is an authentic Bedouin story, and what's beautiful about it now is what we're seeing is the symbolism. The two arms represent two palm trees where the branches of the palm trees touch each other, and these palm trees grew over the graves of the two lovers, symbolizing really the celebration of romance and love over traditional forms of marriage. So it's a beautiful imagery, beautiful story that Bedouins say, and are giving a prevalence for love, something we don't really understand about traditional cultures like that. So here we have love prevailed over cousin marriage.
God, that's so beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to see the long version of it.
Oh, it would be wonderful.
So it's wonderful. But in the interest of time, we have to go back to our little corner here.
Okay.
And why don't we talk about feminism now? Let's talk about the modern women in the Arab states.
Well, it's interesting when you look today at statistics of education and employment, you'll find tremendous
Right.
changes taking place since the 60s. And places like Iraq, Kuwait, Egypt, Tunisia, women have moved out of the home. They have joined the public employment force. And are educated. You find no difference between males and females in the patterns of where they go in education. You find many medical doctors and engineers and so on. And you also find, as part of that advance, as part of that progress, several trends emerging of what I would call feminisms. There is the kind of feminism that we know about here in the United States, which is the Western feminism, liberal feminism,
Right.
which is just let's move out, get an education, and that means I'm free. But we also have another kind, a religious kind of a feminism, because Islam is growing in strength. It is becoming part of a political movement, a resistance movement all over the Arab world. And as part of this movement is also women who are becoming more and more active in Islam. And this is very important because if Christian women or Jewish women or Muslim women want to really advance their own cause or want to liberate themselves, they have to do it not through secular feminism, but they
Right.
have to do it within their own traditions.
I see.
So Christian feminists have to get into Christianity
Right.
and get into the interpretation of the original sources.
makes
Same
sense.
thing with Islam. Women now are entering and trying to define a position for themselves,
Right.
questioning some interpretations. And it's very interesting. If you look today, you find in Pakistan, the leader of the government there, a
Right.
Muslim woman.
Right.
The head of Turkey is a Muslim woman.
Exactly.
The head of Bangladesh, and so on and so
Right.
forth. So there's nothing really that keeps them from taking on very progressive and high positions
Right.
in the government or in society. But there are other forces, conservative forces, that try to control the women. But it's up to the women
Right.
to really organize themselves and raise their consciousness
Right.
to question the system.
And to go into their own.
In their own, they don't have to imitate the West.
Right,
They don't have to
exactly,
accept
exactly.
secular feminism.
I think that a lot of times could be an obstacle by wanting to imitate something that
That's right.
really isn't coming out of their own
It doesn't work.
areas. It doesn't work. That's
Yes.
right. It does not work.
But
It
if you-
might be a help or a guidance or something like that, but it's a totally different.
Exactly. I mean, if they are secular, then they use
Right.
secular models. But if they are
Right.
religious, they'll have to go to look at the sources. And I can tell you from now something that I've been studying for a while. If they go into the original sources, Islamic sources, they will find that it is very much to their advantage to go back to the original sources and enter the interpretation, because over the years it got interpreted by men and they have a monopoly over the interpretation. That wasn't to the advantage of women at all.
My God. Now let me, we're getting the signal. We don't have too much time left, but what do you see for the future? I mean, that's a big question, I know. But what do you see in the very near future? I mean, do you think there will be a breakthrough, or is it, for instance, one country we sort of step backwards, like Iran, whatever? Is there a possibility of
I don't
going
see,
backwards?
even in Iran, I don't see it as a step backward. Again, they are having their own struggles.
Exactly, they're trying to
They're
define
having their own
themselves
struggles.
in a
But
different way.
I see that change is irreversible. There's no way to move back. You know, even if they cover their faces, which people see as a move backward,
Right.
they cover their faces and go to the office. That's not a move backward. That's not seclusion. That's participation in the public
their own-
domain. That's participation in force. So I don't see it as regressive necessarily. We shouldn't be bothered by the external,
That's right.
you know,
That's right.
appearances.
Right.
What is important is education is inevitable. Participation in the labor force is inevitable. So change is irreversible. They have to move forward. And moving forward means taking charge of their lives, taking charge of their families, and taking charge of what decides about their lives, which in the case of Muslims is
Right.
Islam, in the case of Christians is Christianity,
Right.
and Jews Judaism.
Fatwa, I can tell you, it was so interesting. As I said to you earlier before we started the show, I'm really going to get a great education. Unfortunately, it's too short.
Yeah, time passed so fast.
We'll have to do it again, and we will. We will bring some other women on the show who will participate, and we will get much more out of it, and we'll get much into it.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much
It's my
for
pleasure.
being here,
Really
and
nice.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
And to my audience, I must say, I learned so much, and I hope you did too, because it was so interesting to learn something from a totally different world. At least that's the way I looked at it. And I have to kind of change my thinking a little bit. Also, it's so nice to see women breaking loose from one area, but yet staying in their confines or in their tradition, and maybe that's the way it has for all of us to work together, men with women.
Absolutely.
You know, it's because I believe it's this women thing should really work for all of us. So, and until I see my audience again, I hope you will be with me next time. I say goodbye